Davey, and you're watching A Walk in the Garden on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television. I'm here in my herb garden, in Norfolk, Massachusetts, and it is almost mid-July, and it is a hot day and a windy one. We're hoping we might get a little rain. It's been very dry the last 2 or 3 months, actually, and we could use a good dose of rain. So perhaps this wind will blow up a little thunderstorm later in the afternoon, and a little bit of rain at least, which will help cool down some of these plants. Our temperatures have been in the 80s, 90s, low 90s, upper 80s, and with the wind it really dries things out fast. I'm in the herb garden, and the herbs are not quite as tall as they would be if we were getting sufficient rain. I just don't have the option of watering it all that much. We are on a water ban in town, handheld hose only, no automatic sprinklers. I don't have them anyhow, and the herbs do fairly well. They are in the shade, which is a disadvantage a lot of the time, but when it's really dry, I think it's somewhat of an advantage. They don't dry out quite as much. I have been hand watering the new herbs and the ones that I have here in pots. I've got a rosemary in a pot so that I can bring it in the winter. I have a little basil in a pot, and I put in some new plants this year. A scented geranium and a couple of those, and so I've had to water those by hand every day or so, and that has kept them going, at least, so that they will survive. Even though it's mid-July and we're using the herbs in the kitchen quite a lot, and we're going to be doing that a little later in the show, it's time to start thinking about fall too. And in thinking about fall, it's time to start thinking about drying herbs. The best time to pick the herbs is early in the morning, right after the dew has dried on the plants, and shortly before they go into bloom. This is oregano, a Greek oregano, and I'm going to do some cutting of that today, even though it is later in the day. They are in the shade, which helps quite a bit. And so I'm going to cut this and put a rubber band on it. The Mediterranean herbs like oregano and the bay leaf like this warm weather. They would be happier if the humidity was a little higher, but some of the days it is. And what I'm going to do with this is use a rubber band, and I particularly like dried oregano. There are various ways to save your herbs for winter, drying being one of them, and you can dry most any herb, but some, to my way of thinking, are better than others when they're dried, and oregano is one of those. Tarragon is also another herb that I would dry rather than make pesto or some of the other things. I'm reaching into my pocket here, and I'm going to walk over to the other side of the herb garden. Again, I'm picking herbs and using them. It's really great to come out while I'm making my dinner and pick some herbs to bring in and cut up and use in my recipes. But I'm going to walk over to this laundry rack that I have set up, and I have a Christmas tree hook that I'm fastening around the rubber band. I use a rubber band instead of a ribbon or string because as this bundle of herbs dries, it will shrink. And if you use a ribbon or a piece of string, they're liable to fall out. So a rubber band works well. It keeps squeezing the herbs and they don't fall on the floor if you have it inside. But I've hooked a Christmas tree hook in it, and I'm going to hook it over this laundry line. And since the wind's blowing, I'm going to push it and fasten it a little better. You can use a clip clothespin and fasten the rubber band onto that. Just a regular old-fashioned clothespin. But the laundry rack will go inside. I put it in my dining room, which we don't use a whole lot in the summer. We tend to eat outside a lot. And I put it in a room that stays dry and not sunny. There's not direct sun on the herbs, and they will dry in a couple weeks. As long as your room is dry and rather dark, and you can put them on it. If you have carpet on the floor, I suggest putting a piece of newspaper or paper underneath, because they do sometimes fall a little bit, and you want any pieces to be caught that might fall in carpet. But a laundry rack works really well. You can also fasten them onto a cabinet or a clothesline or a piece of string or stretched across an area, and they will dry that way. I sometimes put them on cupboard doors if you have latches on your cupboard doors that will hold them. Again, dry and dark, and you'll have plenty of herbs to take off of the stems and store away for the winter. Now let's move over to the perennial garden and see what's going on there. I've been doing a lot of work in the perennial garden in the last month or so. If you have watched the show before, you know that I had a lot of spring bulbs blooming in this garden in April and May. And we left all of the greenery on those bulbs after the flowers had faded. And it ripened and turned brown, and then I was able to pull it out. And this leaves some spots in the garden after you've pulled out the old foliage. And I've put some potted plants in those spaces just as fillers. These are things that I had in the house. The pineapple lily, eucomis, is a tender summer bulb, and you can purchase those bulbs in the early spring to be planted, or in the case of the ones I have 3 pots of them now, and I can separate them even further. I keep them over the winter in a dormant state, and then in the spring I bring them out and add water, and you see I have pineapple lilies in place. The daylilies are starting to bloom now, and I still have a few things to cut off as they go. The Asiatic lilies are starting to have bloomed. This one was an Asiatic lily, and I'm just going to cut off the old bloom. I'll leave the greenery that's there, again, to feed the bulb that's underneath. These, of course, are hardy, so you don't need to worry about pulling the bulb in the fall. The eucomis, on the other hand, once it starts to go, you want to get it into the house because it is a tender bulb, more of a tropical bulb. But it looks nice in the garden and fills one of those spots where there were a lot of daffodils that went to seed. This is Eupatorium chocolate. At least I think that's what it is. They've been changing the Latin names on a lot of these plants, so it was. And it will have white blooms later, but right now it's dark foliage. Kind of adds some coolness to the garden. We have some daylilies that are coming into bloom and are in bloom, and echinacea, which is the pink daisy-like flower. Those are blooming, and I would have quite a lot more, except I have rabbit problems. Like everybody else in town, the rabbits have been really busy this year, and I had more of the echinacea back here that they snuck out of the wooded area behind and devoured. It may or may not come back. I have added some fencing around it, and I've been putting either dried blood or bone meal around it, both of which can deter rabbits. It slows them down, but you have to keep applying it regularly in order to keep them away. They also ate my balloon flower, and that would have been a tall blue flower about here, but now it is a short green plant that's about a foot tall. Now whether this will again gain some height and bloom later is a good question. I'm of course leaving it there, and I have a little fence around it, and we'll see if perhaps we can get some late blooms. If you'll remember, last time we did do some what are called Chelsea chops, meaning we chopped some plants a little lower so that they would bloom a little later and bush out. And that may be the case with the balloon flower and the echinacea, the rabbits having done the Chelsea chop instead of me. This is the foxglove that bloomed beautifully here. Foxgloves in my garden tend to go where they will, and this one is not a great location, but that's where it bloomed, so I left it. And now I'm letting it go to seed. And what I want to do when these seed pods are making seed is spread some of it around so that it will come up in other spots. Foxglove tends to be a biennial, meaning it comes up one year, blooms the next year, and then dies. So this plant probably will not be here next year, but its progeny will if I spread the seeds around. And the pods are now ripening, and I will cut off some of these stems and put them in other spots in the garden so that I will have new foxgloves coming up next year, perhaps towards the back where the taller flowers would be more appropriate. This is a plant that likes it dry and sunny, and it is a yarrow, and this is a pink one. They come in a variety of pink and orange and red and white colors. The native plant itself is white. You'll find a lot of that along the roadsides. But the cultivars can be various colors in the pink and red and orange family, yellow, and add a lot to the garden. This is a aster, a fall aster, which will bloom in blue a little later. They should be fairly nice together. Behind me I have Heliopsis, which is a yellow daisy type flower. Again, it also seems to like the hot, dry conditions a little better than some others. It's really amazing when you have a wet year like last year, followed by a dry one like this year, to see which plants grow taller and thrive and which plants don't particularly care for those conditions. I'm going to move down a little ways and pick up my catalogs here. It's time to order spring bulbs. Believe it or not, it is time now to think about your spring garden and what you want to plant this fall. You want to start now because they sell out of some of the favorites rather quickly. So I get a variety of catalogs to go through. I can sit in the shade and go through the bulb catalogs and then place a few orders. I have quite a few bulbs. I won't be adding too many, but I always like to add a few new tulips and perhaps some other bulbs that are a little different. So check your mailbox or online and look for bulbs now before they're out. They won't send them until it's time to plant them in the fall, so you have some time, but you want to get your orders in now. I'm going to move down here and see what we have. I have more phlox coming in, and these are the seed heads from the Siberian irises, and I'm going to leave those to mature, as well as these poppy heads, which are almost ready. And when they've turned brown, I will pick them, and I will be saving those to use in fall and winter decorations. They can be painted, sprayed with spray paint, usually white or silver or gold, and used in decorations with greens later on, or dried flowers. The Oriental poppy itself is normally losing its foliage. Its foliage is going to completely brown out in the next month, and there will be nothing left of it until a little later in the fall when new foliage will come up and be there during the fall. It's a completely normal cycle for this plant. I have lots of asters that will be blooming in the fall, later in the fall, and again a little rabbit damage in front. We've had a lot of little baby bunnies out here enjoying the clover, which is, this lawn is almost entirely clover in this area. And the baby bunnies do like that. I'm hoping they'll eat that instead of my flowers, but so far they've had a taste of all of it. This is butterfly weed that's has bloomed, and if I cut off the old blooms, it may bloom again. And certainly it's starting to form pods, and these pods will open and spread seed for more butterfly weed. This is one of the monarch's favorites, along with the common milkweed. It's in the milkweed family and is really good for monarchs, and they are all over it at times when it's in bloom. My roses, unfortunately, bloomed early, and I have given them their second dose of fertilizer, but they really need 5 gallons of water a week, and I just have not been able to supply that. It's been a chore to just carry water out to water everything. So I've been selective. Hopefully we'll get some rain and they'll perk up and we'll have more blooms to August and September. Again, there are a few lilies in back. Those are on their way out. But we have more lilies to come. The oriental lilies will be blooming in August. And I have several of those around the garden. They tend to be a little taller than the Asiatic lilies. And I have a variety of different colors. Black-eyed Susans will be blooming soon. Blue phlox in back. And yellow, bright yellow coreopsis right here. And again, they tend to be a little resistant to the drought. I've made a little dish here with it being so dry. This is a butterfly watering spot, and it's just a dish I had that's small size. I put a few rocks in it so they could perch on those, and I try to keep a little bit of water in this little container to hopefully encourage the butterflies to stop for a drink because it is so dry. They do need water as well. Sometimes you'll even see them on the butterfly feeder or the hummingbird feeder, as well as small birds will also come to the hummingbird feeder to get some water. Lavenders love this weather, and they're in full bloom too. And we have a Stokesia or Stokes aster, which also seems quite happy. And they come in several different colors. Blue is a common one. This one is a pale yellow. The chrysanthemum that is here, I pinched on the 4th of July. That's the last pinch of the season for chrysanthemums that you have carried over. We pinched them on the 4 holidays, 4th of July, Father's Day, Mother's Day, and Memorial Day. If you remember the 4 holidays to pinch the geraniums, you will have geraniums that don't get too tall and leggy. Here in the vegetable garden, and I've already picked and removed my early lettuce crop, and I've planted a new crop. And I've planted some more radishes, and a little more lettuce, and some kale, and some Swiss chard. And I need to keep that moist so that the seeds will come up. That's a challenge to do too. The peas have almost finished for the season. I have 3 kinds of peas, and I've been picking them regularly. I probably can get a few more from this set, and then I'll pull those and remove the fence and have another row to plant with something else that will mature in the fall. I have snow peas, snap peas, and shell peas. The shell peas are the latest, and once the pods are full, we pick them and shell them out and have a few peas. We don't get a lot, but we get some. My raspberries have been a big failure this year as far as fruit goes. The plants are looking pretty good, but I haven't had as much fruit due to the drought, and also chipmunk invasion. Turns out chipmunks really like raspberries. I know they like strawberries. They ate some of the strawberries, but they really do like raspberries, and they climb right up to get them. So they have gotten quite a few of my raspberries in spite of the nets. The nets have helped keep birds out of them, but it does not do a thing for the little chipmunks who can make it through my fence. Again, chipmunks can climb quite well, and they can climb over a fence and get into the garden. The strawberries are, of course, finished, nets removed, and they've been fertilized and will now put out runners, which will make more new plants for next year. I've been picking the scallions that are next to the strawberries, and some dill has come up here and there. You'll see the fluffy dill tops here and there, and also some borage, which is this plant. Borage is an herb which tastes a bit like cucumber, and here you can see a couple of these snow peas that we can come out and pick a little later. And the borage has pretty little blue flowers that the bees love. And we need the bees to pollinate everything else, so It's a win-win situation. This is celery, and garden celery is really good. Again, you need to keep it watered in order to get a good crop of celery, although even the small stalks are very tasty. Quite a bit different than what you can buy in the store. I have my cucumbers on trellises, and again another borage that just came up voluntarily. They do reseed. And I have little teeny cucumbers, and they will turn into big cucumbers within a week or so. And I also plant some flowers in among the vegetables. These are zinnias. We have a few buds on those, and again, in another couple of weeks we'll have a nice row of flowers. This is my garlic row, and garlic needs to be harvested when most of the lower leaves have turned brown. I'm going to dig one now and check it out. And this is the way I'll be digging it. You'll see I have a nice bulb on this one. I'll get some of the dirt off of it. And there's a nice bulb with many cloves. Now this will go out in my shed, as will the rest of it. And you want to make sure you get the largest cloves possible that have not opened up. Once the garlic is over mature, the cloves will open up, and then it won't keep as well for the winter. So this will go out in my shed for a couple weeks, and I keep the door and the window open for good air circulation. And you could also use a garage or any place where it's kind of under cover. You want it to dry, and then we can cut off the stem and the roots and store this for the winter. And if you plant enough, you can have garlic all winter long. I planted a lot of Brussels sprouts, piracicaba, which is a broccoli relative. It's very much like broccolini that you buy at the store. I have some cabbage and then some broccoli plants. Now these are going to be harvested a little later. It's hot right now, but when it cools down a little, we should get some good broccoli, as long as I can keep it watered and keep the insects off. I do use an organic spray about every 2 weeks on these crops, because I really don't like to have bugs in my broccoli and Brussels sprouts and piracicaba and cabbage. So it kind of keeps the cabbage worms at bay. I have mini cabbages over here, and they'll be ready to harvest in another couple weeks. Plenty of lettuce left, and greens, perpetual spinach, some eggplants that are growing, little kale, and of course tomatoes. And I have some baby tomatoes, but I'm going to be, and I have a tomatillo, and a tomatillo has these papery coverings on the tomatillo fruit, and this is what you make the green salsa with. It tends to be a southern plant. It's quite happy here though, and I found out the hard way that all I need is one plant, because it bears heavily. We don't use that much of it, and I planted 6 the first year and had way too much. So one plant it is, and it will continue to flower and produce fruit well into the fall. For the tomatoes, I use a tomato and vegetable fertilizer, and I'll put about a cup around each plant every 2 weeks. And then water it in. Again, I have a hose out here to the garden so I can fill my watering can. And we'll just water that in with 1 or 2 gallons of water per plant. And hopefully this will keep it going for a while. Again, as my lettuce matures and starts to go to seed, I'll be picking the lettuce. You'll notice I'm using clips like you get for your potato chip bag. I'm using that on my fertilizer bags to keep it from spilling all over. It works quite well, since they don't have Ziploc tops yet. They haven't figured that out, I guess, but the chip clip works well to seal the bag and keep it from spilling. Gonna move over this way a little past the cabbages, more flowers. And I have basil at this end and some leeks, and then we have some dill and cilantro up further in the garden, and beans. And we now have baby beans, just tiny little ones, maybe an inch long, but I know that means that by next week I'll be picking beans. I have green beans, half a row, and half a row of yellow beans. I also have a couple of yellow squash and a couple of zucchini. Again, I found out through experience I only need 2 of each, 2 hills of each squash. There are multiple plants in each hill. This year I put some aluminum foil around the stems at the base to hopefully keep the borers that can get into the squash from laying eggs near the base of the plant. We'll see if it works. I just put a tiny bit of aluminum foil at the base of each plant and wrapped it around the stem. So far so good, but we'll see how effective it is. I have used foil around the plants before. I've used row covers and have not been as successful with any of those. I have some blueberries here which I'm attempting to keep covered because we do have quite a few blueberries set onto the plants. I need to get out a few clothespins to close up these nets to help keep the birds and chipmunks out of them. It's a good place to work when it's hot is down in the shade garden because it's probably 10 degrees cooler down here than it was up in the vegetable garden. I try to get my vegetable garden and flower garden work done early in the day, usually before 10 o'clock, so that I can get out of the heat and the sun. Back here I have removed the foliage from all of the crocuses that once bloomed, or it has just automatically died back. And the hellebore blooms have been removed so that they won't go to seed too much. I probably missed a few, so we'll have some new plants coming up. I have lots of ferns back here, and so far they seem to be getting enough moisture with the small amount of water I can give them. But I also have pots here and there of flowers that I've brought from my house plants inside, and also the cuttings we did last winter of coleus, particularly in the shade garden. And those I need to water almost daily in order to keep them growing. One of the things you can do with coleus to keep the plants bushing out is to remove the very center blossoms when they're very small. And this causes the plant to form 2 new stems, and the plant will become more bushy as it grows taller. I have a lot of hosta back here. I watch it for slugs and also deer damage. I use the iron phosphate preparation for slugs. It's an iron preparation which is not poisonous, which some of the old slug baits were extremely poisonous. You can also put beer in tuna fish cans or other small cans and they attract the slugs. But then you have to get rid of them, where with the iron thing, iron crystals, or not crystals, they're pellets. You just don't see the slugs or the slug damage. I prefer that to having to see the slugs and get rid of their bodies. And again, it is not toxic for children or pets, so it's very good to use. The hosta do need water, especially if they're in the sun. In the shade, they do a little better. I have lots of ferns back here of different types and different kinds. They've been fun to have. Some of them grow all on their own. Others I've planted, and they've multiplied. I've been gardening in this location for about 50 years, and it's still a project that's incomplete, and will continue to be, I'm sure, for many years to come. Gardening is that way. You're never finished. There's always a new project, or redoing something, or expanding, or reseeding. Always something to do in the garden. If you have a garden, it'll keep you busy. Now let's head back by the fish pond and see how they're doing. I must entertain easily because one of my pastimes is to come out and count the frogs that are in my pond. And they just come. I have never put frogs in the pond, but they found it, and I usually have quite a few. I think that indicates that the pond is pretty healthy. At least I hope so. I have counted today 1, 2, 3, 4 at least. And there are probably a few more. Often during the day they go off into the plants around the pond and do a little hunting, and sometimes we even hear them croaking out in the plants. And then they tend to, around 4 o'clock, they'll come back in, although there's quite a few here today. I think they want to cool off. And periodically they take a swim, and otherwise they sit on the edge and catch any bugs that happen to fly by. But I enjoy the frogs and also the fish, which I feed daily. And those I did put in the pond. And usually they'll come right up if I have food. We'll see if they do. They may want to stay down where it's cool today. I think they're going to stay down low. It's a little cooler down there, I'm sure. I'm still adding the enzyme products to the pond to keep it clear, as well as circulating the water, and I've added aerators that cause some bubbles here and there to add some air to the pond, which also helps keep it clear and provides the fish with a little more oxygen. And I'm just going to throw one of these in. It will sink to the bottom and then empty, and they're enzymes that help keep the pond clear. And I throw one of those in about once a week, and about every month I throw in a pellet that helps dissolve some of the sludge that can form in the bottom. My pond is in the shade, and so it tends to collect a little more debris than those that would be in the sun. However, I don't have the algae problems that people who have a sunny pond sometimes get. So it depends what you have, what you need to use in your pond to keep it clear. I've added some of the annuals we started back in February or March. Those are the impatiens. And then I have a few other annuals over here, another coleus, a new one, and a fuchsia and a begonia, again getting part shade. And this begonia, which again will need plenty of water on these hot windy days. I brought out a fern that I have usually inside to spend the summer outside. That's on summer vacation. And many days, so am I. And I sit in my chair and read my book and enjoy my garden, which don't forget to enjoy your garden. Sometimes it's a lot of work, and you need to make sure you take some time to just enjoy the fruits of your labors and enjoy what you have created in your garden and not see every weed that comes along. There's a frog right now answering me. They like to talk back, I guess. So now let's go inside where it is much cooler and do a little cooking with some of the things that we harvested from the garden. Now the fun begins. We get to use the things that we pick from the garden. And I really enjoy having a garden because I enjoy using all of my produce in the kitchen. And one of the things I'm going to do today, going back to this preserving and thinking ahead, is to make some pesto. And today I'm going to make some cilantro pesto. And pesto is really easy to make, and you can make it with so many different herbs. Today I will be using garlic, which I've put 2 cloves of garlic in the food processor. And then I am adding 1 cup of parsley and 1 cup of cilantro. I've added the parsley because cilantro can get a little much if you use all cilantro. If you really like it, you can use all cilantro. But the parsley kind of tempers it a little. And then I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of walnuts. Now you can use pine nuts, or you can use almonds or walnuts or cashews even. Some sort of nuts go into pesto, and Parmesan cheese. And again, I have about 1/3 of a cup of Parmesan cheese that we'll put in. And then I'm going to turn on the food processor and process it until it's rather fine. Then you'll probably need to scrape down the sides at least once. And you can see everything is getting chopped really fine. And now I'm going to add about 3/4 of a cup of olive oil. And again, we'll scrape it down once and keep processing until it's as fine as you want it and everything is extremely well mixed. And there we have a pesto. And this is cilantro pesto. This one is fairly thin. I probably added a little more olive oil than I should have, but it will still be fine. And we can use this as a dip. Spread it on pizza crust and put some other vegetables on it to make a Mexican style pizza. We can add some diced cooked chicken, some diced tomato, cheese, and have a pizza, a cilantro pizza, pesto pizza. You can also add a little bit to some rice or pasta to flavor it. And what I like to do is freeze my pestos in an ice cube tray. And this one is garlic scape pesto. Again, the ingredients are, once you have them, the proportions you can kind of decide yourself. I gave you a rough idea of 2 cups to 3/4 of a cup of oil, 1/3 to 1/2 a cup of nuts, the same with Parmesan cheese. And garlic. I did not, of course, use garlic with the garlic scapes because they already had garlic flavor. We picked those last month and I've had them in the refrigerator. Made the garlic pesto and put it into the ice cube tray. These, once they're frozen solid, can be popped out and put in a plastic bag and saved for winter use. And I'll do the same thing with the cilantro. During the winter, of course, cilantro is not that available. It is in the store, but you have to buy a humongous bunch of cilantro. If you only want a little bit to flavor something, for instance, the bean burgers that I made call for cilantro, but I can use some of the cilantro pesto and get the same flavor without buying a whole bunch from the store. So you can make various pestos, including, of course, basil pesto, which is the original. And we'll be making that as the different basils mature later in the summer. It's a good way to store these herbs that really don't dry well at all. Dried pesto or dried cilantro doesn't have any flavor, and I wouldn't dry the garlic scapes at all. So these are things that you can keep in another way besides drying. So you have to kind of pick your method based on the herb itself and how it relates. I'm going to be making an herb cheese that I made as a spread for a group last weekend, and they really enjoyed it, so I thought I would do it again, but treat it a little differently at some point. And what I've started with is 8 ounces of cream cheese, which I've softened. And to that, I'm going to add a few things. And I'm going to add 1/4 of a cup of cream, and I'm going to add it gradually. And this is heavy cream, and use my mixer to mix it. And I'm adding it gradually, so hopefully it doesn't spray all over. a quarter of a cup translates to 4 tablespoons. Little cooking math. 2 this time, and then the final one. And along with the last tablespoon, I'm going to add some seasonings. Which would be a pinch of cayenne pepper. You'll never know it's there. And about a quarter of a teaspoon of salt. And I'm just going to shake some in. And we'll continue mixing at this point till it's nice and fluffy. And then I'm going to add the herbs. 2 tablespoons of chopped dill, 2 tablespoons of chopped parsley, and 2 tablespoons of chopped chives, all from the garden or herb garden. And I'll mix these in. And then I'm going to use some of this mixture to fill some snow peas. And these are snow peas that I have picked, and I microwaved them for 1 minute with a little water, then chilled them in cold water and drained them well, and then used my knife to open them. And a little sharp pointed knife you can stick right in the end and open these up right down the seam, and then you have an opening in each of the snow peas. And I did that before in the effort to save some time. And then I'm going to use a pastry bag because I find that easier than a spoon, a little less messy, and put some of the cheese mixture in. And I have just a plain broad tip. And we'll probably have some of this left so that we can serve us some crackers also. But we'll fill some of these snow peas. And I've got a plate here to put them on once I'm done filling them, and some extra crackers. And just fill them with the cheese mixture as a little hors d'oeuvre. These can be prepared in advance and, put in the refrigerator if you're having an event and want a little hors d'oeuvre. Be just fine, chilled. And I'll do one more. There we are. More in there, and then I can put this out with the spread, which can be served along with the crackers. So you could go either way with it. You could also spread it on toasts or any number of things. Now the next thing I'm going to make is a main dish, and that is a chicken Caesar salad. Caesar salad's pretty easy to make your own. And I'm going to make the croutons first by heating up some butter and oil and garlic in a pan. And I've cut some bread in cubes, about a cup's worth of bread. which is a sourdough bread. And if it's a little stale, so much the better. So these other items out. And so again, the croutons are what come first, and we need to heat up the oil and butter. These can be made in advance, and then you have it for later. This is a good hot day meal, actually. Or luncheon dish. And I'm going to add my bread cubes now that everything's kind of melty, and stir them around, and we're going to just let those cook until they get nice and brown and crispy. And then we'll set them aside. Again, there is 1 good-sized clove of garlic, which has been finely chopped, in with 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 tablespoons of olive oil. The olive oil in with the butter will help keep the butter from burning as these cook. If you have stale bread and want to make croutons, you can certainly do this and just not add the garlic. I would suggest that once they're finished, you might want to freeze them if you're not going to use them right away. Or at least refrigerate them because of the butter. And then perhaps heat them up a little bit in the oven when you take them out to use. Oh, there our garlic croutons look pretty good. We're going to let them cool a little bit while we make the rest of the salad and the dressing. Caesar salad often uses romaine lettuce, but I don't grow romaine lettuce. I have lettuce that is close, however, and I've washed it and spun it dry and filled a bowl with the lettuce, and it's been refrigerated, and we'll just serve it right in this bowl. And I will make the dressing, which I'm starting out with 3 tablespoons of olive oil in a jar. It's an old peanut butter jar, so whatever you happen to have will work. A glass jar works better than a plastic one. I have 3 tablespoons of lemon juice. I'm going to add about 1/8 of a teaspoon of dry mustard, and some salt and pepper. And just a few good shakes and a few twists. We can also serve more on the salad, more pepper, a little later with it. And the thing that most Caesar salad has in it is egg. And it's not a good idea to use raw egg and consume raw egg due to the risk of salmonella, particularly for older immune-compromised people. And so I'm using the Egg Beaters Original, and this is a pasteurized product, and it works just fine. And 4 tablespoons is the equivalent of 1 whole egg. So I'll add that. And that will be our salad dressing. And we'll shake it up. And I'll shake it again to mix it. I'm not going to add the dressing to the salad right now because this is our supper. And I really don't want it to wilt at this point. It should be added, the dressing should be added right before you consume the salad. But I will add about 6 ounces of sliced grilled chicken. This can be chicken from a rotisserie chicken that you bought at the grocery store, or a little extra that you grilled 2 or 3 nights ago and kept in the refrigerator, which is what we did. We had grilled it night before last along with our dinner, and grilled some extra, which I kept in the refrigerator and sliced up for the salad. I'm going to add the croutons. And we will toss everything together at the end once we've added the dressing. And a 1/4 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. Now, if you really love anchovies, you can also add those. Since I have chicken, I like anchovies, but since I have chicken in the salad, I am not going to add the anchovies tonight. So this will be our salad and the dressing, which I'll shake up again later. Add and toss everything together. It makes a fairly quick meal and a nice one for a hot day. You can put this part in the refrigerator early in the morning, and if you're out for the day, come home, add the dressing, and you have a quick meal. If you're out weeding the garden or doing something else, just prepare it early. It's best to pick your lettuce early in the morning anyway, when it's still very fresh and not wilty. And that will be one of the things you can do. Now, the next thing I want to do, we're going to move over to my baking area and make some blueberry muffins. Blueberries are in season. This is berry season all the way. I believe you can get cherries, raspberries, blueberries, and they all make great muffins. Today I'm going to use blueberries in the muffins. I like streusel on my muffins. I don't like my muffins quite as sweet as the ones that you buy in the stores. They're almost like cake, and I prefer a muffin that's maybe a little old-fashioned, but I do like streusel on top. So I've put 2 tablespoons of butter in a little dish, and it's softened, and I'm adding 2 tablespoons of brown sugar and a 1/4 cup of flour and a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And I'm going to mix this with the fork until it gets nice and crumbly. And we're going to put this on top of the muffin batter when it's finished, but I want it ready when I have the batter finished. So I'll mix it up now. You can also use your fingers, clean fingers, to do this, or gloved fingers, but a fork works too. Oh, we just want some nice crumbs. Not totally mixed together, but just till it's crumbly. There we are. Now for the muffin batter itself. Muffins are easy. I would find it very difficult to buy a muffin mix, simply because they're so easy to make. And the method for making muffins is pretty standard. You mix the dry ingredients, you add the wet ingredients, and then you bake them. And for the dry ingredients, I have 2 cups of flour, 1/3 cup of sugar. Again, they're not going to be terribly sweet. A tablespoon of baking powder and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We'll mix that together. And then I'll mix together the wet ingredients, which will be 1 cup of milk. And you can use a 2-cup measure to do this. You don't need to have 2 or 3 bowls. Many recipes tell you to use a bowl for this, a bowl for that, but you can just use your measuring cup and add up to a 1/4 cup, because you want a 1/4 cup of oil. And I'm using just vegetable oil, canola oil. A 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. And 1 egg. And here comes the little fork again. We're going to mix this all together so that the egg is all mixed in. and I'll add it in to the dry ingredients and then mix it by hand until the flour has been made wet. Now, you don't want to overmix muffins. I don't want to get the mixer out and really beat this for 5 minutes, because then the muffins will have big tunnels because we've overmixed the batter. You don't want to undermix it and have open up a muffin to find raw flour. So just so it's been mixed, it will still be a little lumpy. Then you add a cup of blueberries or other fruit. Doesn't have to be blueberries. And gently mix that in, just until they've been mixed in. Then we're going to fill our greased muffin pans. I've sprayed this with cooking spray. And I'm going to fill each cup fairly full, making sure I get some of the fruit in each muffin. And this should make a dozen. And then we add our streusel topping that we've already made, and I'll add about a teaspoon to each one and just spoon it over the top. And we're going to put these into a 400-degree oven for 25 minutes. And those will be our muffins. And through the magic of TV, these are what we will have, is blueberry muffins to serve either as a snack, breakfast, or even dessert for dinner. They wouldn't be bad with a little ice cream and whipped cream on them either, split open. So blueberry muffins, in season, summer meal. I want to point out the vase that I have my flowers in, and this is just a pickup bouquet that I walked around the garden and picked various blossoms from each of the plants and brought it in and put it in water. And the vase I actually made, and I had shells that the children had collected at the beach when they were young, and they just sat in a box, and I thought I should do something with those shells. So what I did is used GE silicone caulk and glued the shells to a tomato can. And that's all the vase is shells glued to a tomato can, but I think it makes a nice summer vase. And inside it I've put a canning jar that I put my flowers in to kind of hold them together, and also to keep the tomato can from rusting. So the flowers are in a canning jar that sits in a tomato can which has been covered with shells. I think it makes a nice presentation. I hope you do too. And we have Caesar salad, an hors d'oeuvre of herb cheese, snow peas, and blueberry muffins, and we have made pesto to be frozen and saved for the winter. And of course we also have the herbs that we are going to dry on the drying rack. I thank you for joining me. I've been happy to show you my garden. I'm Liz Davey, and you've been watching A Walk in the Garden on Norfolk Community Cable, NCTV.